Hello everyone, this is the finale of What If Naruto Was a Genius at Genjutsu, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
It had been 3 days since Naruto had first met and started to train his new genin team, and in that time each of the genin in his team had shown a fierce determination and work ethic not unlike his own in completing the tasks assigned to them by Naruto. They could all tree walk and make it up and down the trees at least 6 times with the current chakra reserve, which was good considering that they were fresh genin just out of the academy. Naruto was smiling as he was walking towards the field assigned to his team for training. He was thinking about his daughter and when he should start teaching her to control her chakra so that he could unseal her dojutsu. It had pained him so to watch his daughter suffer in pain when he applied the seal to her, but it was for her own good. He decided that he would start teaching her chakra control when she turned 3, since by then he hoped to have her talking like normal kids and her chakra was unlocked naturally at birth, so he didn't have to waste time unlocking it when he could give her some leaves to stick to her head. He arrived at the training ground at 7 a.m., which was when he and his team's day started, but unlike his genin sensei, he was on time more often than not. All right, gather up team. His team instantly stopped what they were doing and came over to him. You've all been practicing hard these past few days and you can almost make it up and down the tree 10 times, which is enough for what I have planned later, so let's push through today and hopefully we can expand your chakra reserves just that little bit more and meet the deadline. Whilst you do that, I will be sitting over by that tree watching and writing notes on new jutsu that I am planning to make, so get to it. He said in a commanding tone at the end. Each nodded in acceptance and then pushed themselves, hoping to finish the training today. Naruto sat down by the tree and started observing the genin. He paid especially close attention to his lone female student. Her natural talent with the shadows and his skill in creating jutsu will most likely lead to amazing feats yet to be seen from the Nara clan. He would need to get her started on shape manipulation in the next 6 months and hopefully get the other 2 started in nature manipulation, since the Nara clan didn't tend to have a chakra nature until they were older and developed it through strict training. He was brought out of his thoughts around midday when he felt a call from the kunai his fiancée always carried with her, which meant only one thing. There was an emergency that she couldn't deal with and protect the daughter at the same time. Ki flooded the area, causing the genin to fall as they looked to see a scowl on the face of their sensei with an activated Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan primed and ready for combat. Stay here and continue training, some fools are about to die dancing with me. He said in an angry voice, hoping to get his point across, and disappeared in a flash of read only to intercept a chakra blade going to pierce his fiancée with Suzanu's hand. There was his wife standing in front of his daughter, protecting her against 20 men in blank white masks that he recognized instantly. He wondered what took that cripple so long to reappear on the grid, but apparently his was biding his time and wanted to start with his wife and daughter. This would not be allowed to stand. He spoke in a cold voice. What does Danzo want from my fiancé and daughter? They all looked to each other and shrugged. Nothing, but he wants to cause you pain. The speaker was instantly engulfed in black flames and burnt to ashes. I give you this one chance, stop and leave this place. You have invaded my home and endangered my family. If you continue to persist, I will slaughter you. It took them 5 seconds to make their minds up, and he instantly molded his Susanoo armor around his wife and daughter whilst he took care of the intruders. He couldn't use any jutsu here because it was too close to his house and would be too destructive. He decided to go with the old classics such as a futon-empowered kunai. He sliced and cut them to pieces. They were nothing to him but ants, and he attempted to show mercy, but they continued to try and hurt him by using his family. This wouldn't stand and he would cut them all down but one. Using his superior speed, he ran past 19 of the 20 men and stabbed them with the futon-enhanced kunai at one of the 8 kill points in the human body. The last man got a chakra-enhanced foot to the sternum, which resulted in a loud crack. He would live without medical treatment, yet it would be incredibly painful to move. Yet move he would when he retreated to Danzo. Naruto stood over the last man with an evil smile and crouched down to look him in the eyes. Run to your master and tell him that he has made it to the number 2 spot on my shit list right after Orochi team, and that I will be seeing him again real soon. The man said and did nothing except disappear in a swirl of leaves. He created shadow clones to gather the bodies and seal them in a scroll to give to Tsunade. He looked towards his fiancée and daughter inside his Susanoo armor that he forgot he still had up and let the ethereal warrior dissipate. His daughter looked at him in awe whilst his fiancée looked in warrior. He just smiled. She always worried about him even when he fought bandits. She was truly the best part of him. Are you two all right? He asked calmly with his normal eyes. They both nodded, but Kushina jumped into his arms and hugged him as tightly as a child can. He smiled. What happened, Yugito? He asked without the chan suffix, allowing her to know he was serious. We were fine. Your brother is still out on mission and your mother was in town shopping. Kushina wanted to play in the garden, so we went out back, and that's when these men came. I would have had a hard time with them, but I was protecting Kushina, so I called you with your kunai, and you know what happened then. She said. He sighed when a clone of himself came over with the scroll. Kushina-chan, do you want to meet my new team that I'm training? He asked with a small smile, getting a raised eyebrow from his fiancée. She nodded enthusiastically, which he returned with a smile and looked to Yugito. We have to see soon, and this will give my team a chance to meet Kushina. He explained. She nodded and held his hand as they disappeared in a flash of red back to the training grounds to find his team still working on the tree walking exercise. Gather up, team. They all stopped and looked towards their sensei with a woman and a child in his arms and walked over to him. Team, this is my fiancé, Yugito-ni, and this is our daughter Kushina Namikaze Uchiha. He looked towards Yugito. This is my team, Shakunara, Mino and Ken. They nodded to each other, but Kushina attempted to get out of Naruto's arms to walk over to them and say hi. He let her down and walked over to Shaku, who was attempting not to jump the poor girl and never let go. Something had come up. Training is cancelled and instead you have a mission. My daughter is the target and she is to be protected at all times until me or my wife return. He said in a serious voice before giving Kushina a kiss on her forehead and disappearing with his wife in a flash or red towards the Hokage Tower. It was still rather early in the morning. Susunade was still asleep at her desk with an empty sake bottle in her hands. Most ninja know not to wake her up when she is like this, but then again Naruto wasn't considered most ninja. He walked over and kicked her legs. He had to react fast to catch Sunade's wrist and stop a chakra-enhanced fist sending him into the wall. Wake up, you lazy woman. He said in a cold tone that sent chills down Yugito's spine. What do you want, Gaki? I was sleeping. Explain to me how 20 unregistered Nuke Nin made it into this village and attacked my family. He responded with his Sharingan active. What? 20 of Danzo's men attacked my family. If I had not returned when I did, then my fiancé and daughter would most likely be dead. I don't know. What did you do to piss Danzo off? Quote. Naruto. Quote. I'm ordering you as your Hokage to explain now. She finished, getting rather annoyed. It's classified by order of the third Hokage. Unclassify it. I can't. There are rules in place to stop newer Hokages finding out about SS class secrets unless the older Hokage explains them. They were put in place by Lord Second to allow the newer Kage, clean slate, so to speak. The only way to unclassify it is to get Sandaime to allow it. She frowned. SS class meant something big and most likely a cover-up on a massive scale. She didn't like the idea that her former teacher would do something like this, but she understood the weight of the Hokage's hat better than anyone at the moment. She snapped her fingers and an Anbu agent appeared kneeling in front of the Hokage. Tori, I want you to retrieve Sandaime-sama. Tell him it's urgent. The agent nodded and disappeared in a flurry of leaves. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You really want to know? I don't like secrets behind my back, she said in a tone of finality. Be warned, you may not like what you see behind the curtain of shinobi. She raised her eyebrow at that, but before she could say anything the Anbu arrived with Sarutobi Hiruzen. You called Lady Hokage? He asked with mirth evident in his voice at being called to the Hokage's office where he used to work by the Hokage. What did you do to piss Danzo off, old man? She asked. Sarutobi paled immediately and looked to Naruto with a raised eyebrow as if asking, what's this about? The fool sent some of his men to attack my family. He will pay. Sarutobi sighed. Seal the room. Tsunade nodded and followed the request. Hiruzen looked to Naruto as if to explain, you have my permission, Naruto. He nodded. The Uchiha clan were planning a coup against the third Hokage. It would have thrown our village into civil war and we weren't ready for any kind of war at that point. We were just getting over the Kyuubi attack and replenishing our forces. Danzo had the magical idea of having the entire Uchiha clan except me and Sasuke wiped out by my older brother, who would then go on to buy an S-class Nuke Nin that would feed Konoha information on the outside world. I was not happy with this. This man would sacrifice my family. My mother, my brother and myself for Konoha. Ye right. I stormed the Hokage's office in a fit of rage and forced the advisors and Sandaime to use another plan that I came up with. The Uchiha clan would still be wiped from existence for the short time whilst my family would be safe, and Danzo, who had been a thorn in mine and the Hokage's side since my birth, would be labeled a traitor to Konoha and executed. We played him like a fiddle. He never knew what happened until me and Itachi finished our report, and he made an excuse to be excused from the meeting and simply disappeared with his brute force. He finished rather smugly towards the end. Why the fuck would you do that? What? All of it? I would not let another of my family be used as a scapegoat by this village. If I had to do something drastic, then I would have. Idiot. Hardly. The fool will die next time we meet, but that isn't the point of this meeting, Hokage. Explain now, how 20 unregistered Nuke Nin managed to infiltrate this village and find my family home that is a secret from most of Konoha to attack my fiancé and daughter. She was silent for a few minutes before speaking. I don't know, but I will find out. Good. Then this meeting is done. I have a team to train and a daughter to look after. He grabbed Yugito's hand and they disappeared in a flash of red, arriving at the training grounds that they left the daughter at. Kushina-chan. His daughter looked up from her leaf and smiled. What are you doing, Kushina-chan? Before she could answer, his lone female student did. She wouldn't stop going on about how awesome a ninja you were and that she wanted to start training, so we gave her a leaf and told her what to do with it. She seemed content and quiet and down, making it easier to keep her safe. Good thinking. How was your training, you three? We made it up the tree 10 times, but we were exhausted by the end of it. The only reason we are standing now is because each of us popped a soldier pill so that we can continue to watch your daughter. She finished with a smile as Kushina hugged her side. Naruto smiled. She seems to have taken a liking to you, Shaku. Shaku-nichan is awesome too, San. Kushina explained with all of her childish exuberance that she could muster. Naruto smiled at that. He looked up at the sky and realized that it was late afternoon. His meeting with the Hokage had gone on far longer than he thought. He still needed to apply security seals around his house to stop any more intruders. The old seals must have worn out whilst he was away on his training trip. That's it for today, guys. Tomorrow we will have a day off in celebration of you guys learning tree walking and giving your coils a chance to calm down after expending so much chakra constantly. If you do any training tomorrow at all, make it physical. See you the day after tomorrow is 7 here. He said whilst he grabbed his family and disappeared in a flash of red again towards his home. The rest of the month passed relatively calmly. Naruto improved security around his compound with seals that only his team and family could bypass. He was taking no chances with his family whatsoever, and he promised himself that Danzo would die painfully in the near future. The team each got water walking down by the end of the first week, which amazed Naruto himself. He was so proud that he got a team with such a work ethic as them. They all had skills, sure, but they all worked for what they had, and he was damn proud. Then came the training from hell for the next 3 weeks for his team, as they called it. He used a seal that he was taught in case he ever had to fight another Jinchuriki called Gogyu-Fuin, also known as a 5-pronged elemental seal. This seal was versatile and could be used on most things just to mess with control, and if it was used atop of an even-numbered seal, then it would most likely have the opposite effect on the user than what the seal was originally designed for. With this seal applied, his team all felt as weak as 5-year-olds due to lack of control over their chakra pools that had grown in recent days. Naruto instructed them to go over all the jutsu they knew until they could perform them again, which was just the Academy 3 and Shunshin, which they learnt in the second week. He didn't force them to redo the basic Bunshin because he himself couldn't do it still, so he felt that it was unfair. By the end of the first month, his team could water walk again with the Gogyu-Fuin in place, but they had just managed to stay atop the water for the required time on the last day. It took 3 weeks, working 9 hours a day on chakra control alone for this, but the results they couldn't argue with. Their chakra control shot up to high Chunin, which was amazing for fresh Genin, and their reserves themselves. Well, Shaku's reserves went to low Jonin due to the fact that they were already around mid-Chunin when she graduated. He couldn't work out for the life of him how they were so high, but he figured that they were naturally bigger, and when combined with the Nara's shadow jutsu, then they were forced to expand. His 2 civilian students were both around low mid-Chunin level of chakra, which was once again amazing considering they were civilians and 1 month out of the academy. When he team shown him their abilities with the Shunshin no Jutsu, he was happy enough to give them another jutsu to learn in their own time, but decided to stay within the supplementary range of jutsu like the Shunshin was. He gave each of them a scroll on the Kage Shuriken no Jutsu, Shadow Shuriken, which could be applied to both kunai and shuriken to multiply the thrown items. It took them 2 weeks to get it down to a position where they could all make 10 clones of the weapons whilst they were sealed still. He himself was quite happy with their progress and invited them to a celebratory dinner with his family at the end of their first month. Of course, his daughter was very excited to see them again. Another thing that happened during the month, Kushina kept practicing with the leaf like she was shown, and it was determined that although she had huge reserves for anyone her age, he control was good enough to stop activating the Sharingan on accident, so he unsealed her bloodline for her and explained the basics of the bloodline and what to do with it. She was all too happy to have a new toy to play with. Now he was outlining his students' next month of training with them groaning at the end of every sentence. He generally felt bad for his students, but he didn't want them to die when on mission and he wasn't there to save them, so he pushed forward. Congratulations on your first month of training. As you see, I have unsealed each of you and your chakra levels and control have improved by leaps and bounds, but what good is having jutsu and control if you can't outrun an enemy? The next month is going to be physical and muscle memory exercises. He finished whilst unsealing 3 sets of weights like his own to give to his team. These are chakra weights, each of them max out at 250 kilograms. You will wear them when you train, eat, sleep, and even when you are in the shower from now on. I've even been nice and already set the weights to 15 kilograms on the legs and 10 on the wrists for each of you. Each of his students groaned whilst he just smiled on, happy to receive the death glares from his students if it meant that they would survive the harsh realities of the ninja world. His students all put on their weights and he gave them the morning off to get used to them before they returned for the torture that was to come. In the morning before you come here, you will run 5 laps around the village in under an hour. Your goal is to be able to do this in under half an hour by the end of the month, and every time you up your weights you will do it again until you can do it under the specified time limit. When you arrive here at 8 AM from now on, you will do a set of 75 push-ups, sit-ups, crunches and pull-ups. You will repeat each set of these until lunch at 1 PM. You will have half hour for lunch, so it is recommended that you bring a bento from home or go to the ramen stand since it is so close. He produced 3 sets of fingerless gloves that had a metal plate on the back of each hand with the leaf symbol on the plate and handed them to his students. They questioned what they were and got a response that would annoy them for the near future. I wear resistance seals over my body to make it harder to move. I also have the same weights that you have in case you are wondering, but these gloves have a localized form to resistance seals on them to make it harder to move your hands. In the afternoon you will run another 5 laps around the village and you can take as long as required for it this time, but as you run you will be performing the 12 hand seals that you were taught in the academy, and once you have run through each of them you will do it in reverse constantly. This will not only improve muscle memory but it will improve your hand seal speed due to the glove seals. It is afternoon, so get to your running, he said with a smile as he sat down by the tree he usually sat and continued to write his usual entry into his journal. As he did this he had time to ponder his dreams for the last few weeks, and that was what he based his thoughts off of for this entry. Entry journal. The nightmares are getting worse. I'm starting to see my death every couple of nights now, and it scares me to think that if these dreams were to come true, then in the near future I will have to leave my fiancé and daughter alone in this world. I hope that they don't come to pass, but at least if they do, then I can count on my family to protect family. In these dreams I stand atop Gamabunta with his brothers Gamaken and Gamahiro beside me. Fukasaku and Shima are on my shoulders and I am in sage mode standing before a massive army. I see shinobi from different countries looking at me with hate and scorn, but I do not care. My eyes are set on the strongest of them. I recognize a few of them as Orochimaru, Onoki the great fence-sitter, and the Raikage. We continue to speak until I am forced to attack. The dream gets blurry from there, but near the end of the day as the sun is setting, all that remains on the field that I stained red with the blood of my enemies is just over 1,000 men. All of whom are trying to kill me. I am exhausted by this point in time, and all that is left of the Kage is A. However, he is missing an arm and is severely exhausted just as I. He smiles and says a few words before catching me by surprise and punching me across the sea of corpses where I can't move. I have nothing left at this point. The toads were all gone, exhausted by battle, and I face a shinobi's greatest moment, the death. But before I see what happens next, I awaken in a cold sweat, shivering at the thought of leaving my family. In my youth I courted adventure and battle to test my strength so that one day I might be strong enough to protect my family, but now I just want to live peacefully. Too much damage has already been done by my hands and I fear that there is not enough time left in my life to make it right. End entry. He put his pen down and looked at the sun setting. He never got to see the small things like this anymore. He was always too busy with his family. He enjoyed the peace that he was haunted by just for this moment. By the end of the month his team was in peak physical shape for someone their age. It also didn't help that he abused his medical seals like hell so that his team could race through the lower level weights to truly benefit from them. He commanded them to keep the weights on even at the end of the month. The same with the gloves, but explained that they would make their way through the weights and gloves at their own level from now on instead of him abusing his seals. He still had 4 months remaining and he figured he would spend the next 2 working on Jutsu and Elemental Chakra. They may or may not get their respective elements mastered in this time, but at least they would have an easier time with Jutsu and it would further increase their chakra capacity for his later training. He handed each of them chakra paper and all 3 were giddy with excitement. He sometime forgot that they were still children with how they acted when training. He smiled as they put chakra into the cards and was quite surprised. Shaku, who he thought would just have the shadow element of her clan because she was too young to have anything else, had lightning, something he was incredibly pleased with since it meant that he could teach her some of his original jutsu. Mino had earth whilst Ken had fire. Oh, he could already see some deadly team combinations coming from this little arrangement, but first he decided to check his team's chakra level. He found out that by the end of the first month, although his team's chakra control and capacity had increased, there was a rather large deficit between the physical and spiritual energies which he would have to make up for, so that was why he tortured his team for the second month on purely physical workouts. His was happy to find that his team's chakra levels had increased again. Shaku had increased, reaching barely mid-jonin levels, but with her control she was bound to be a jutsu powerhouse later in life, and his 2 male students had reached high chunin bordering low jonin levels of chakra with the same amount of control that they had before. He smiled. They would all be able to handle his trademark jutsu that he used for everything. Shaku could probably make around 10 clones before tiring, whilst the 2 boys could make between 5 and 7 clones. This would be a big help to them, so he decided against his better judgment to teach them the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He handed them each a scroll and asked if they had any questions, which got a negative shake of the head in return whilst he went to sleep, leaving them to learn from the scrolls and telling them to wake him should they need help. You will not move on to elemental training until all of you can perform this jutsu. We fight as a team and we lose as a team. He awoke 5 hours later by being nudged by his lone female student and was surprised to see 15 Shakus and 7 Minos and 6 Kens. He blinked twice owlishly. He had not been expecting them to complete the jutsu today and was only still here as a show of support. What was another mildly amusing surprise was Shaku. She kept surpassing his expectations and her control must have gone up again to be able to make 15 clones like this. Holy shit, well done. You are never to use these clones to battle unless it is an ambush. They take too much chakra from the user and the memory feedback can be damaging. For the next 2 months you will continue your 5 laps around the village each morning, but then you will come here to train. I will not be here since it is purely elemental training. I will give you scrolls and whatever else you need to do the training, but you won't be learning jutsu anytime soon unless I decide you are ready. If you need help, then come and find me, he said as he handed them each a scroll on the basics of their elements. He left Shaku with only lightning elemental training and told her to practice her shadow manipulation at home with her family. He left to spend some much needed time with his family. Things were looking up for Naruto. In the past week, his dreams about his demise had all but come to a halt. His goddaughter was born 2 weeks prematurely, but he didn't care and he all in all felt better than he had in a long time. He even made a breakthrough with his Susanoo training, but that is a story for another time. So by the end of the second half decent week he had in a long time, he knew something was going to happen soon and he could just tell that it was going to annoy the hell out of him. In light of his recent dreams, he had the foresight to update his last will and testament and hand it into the current Hokage, which got him a raised eyebrow from the Godime, to which he replied that you can never be too careful. He sent double the amount of clones to finish his little training diary that he was creating, which held all training schedules and activities that he had completed since his 8th birthday for his daughter and any more possible descendants in the future to help his clan and family prosper. He still hadn't gotten to see his brother yet and was starting to get rather concerned, but was told by the Hokage that he was on a top secret S-class mission, which annoyed him to no end. His daughter was now tree climbing. This was one of the highlights of his week, to see his 3-year-old daughter using chakra in such a way. Yugao had given birth to a healthy if not slightly small due to premature labor girl with purple hair like her own. It was still too early to tell if she had which features from either parent, and the child was forced to stay in hospital until she grew enough to breathe on her own. Naruto was so happy for the couple that he even added them to his will, which they didn't know, but he gave them a house on the outskirts of Konoha that he had brought upon his return and sealed with several security seals so that they could live peacefully with the daughter, and he even made sure that it had extra rooms and space to expand for their possibly growing family. Naruto was walking towards the training grounds to start his teams on their taijutsu practice with his style. He was looking forward to watching them squirm as they tried to learn his style of fighting when all of a sudden he disappeared in a poof of smoke. He opened his eyes and regained his bearings to see his senjutsu teachers in front of him smiling at him. "Fukasaku-sama, Shima-sama, what is it you need of me today?" he asked politely, trying to hide the fact that he was slightly annoyed that he was now going to be late to meet his team. Fukasaku spoke first. "The elder sage has had a new prophecy about you." This piqued his interest a little. He didn't like the fact that someone could tell what would happen in his life in the future, but it was always an interesting point of view for him to try and understand. As they walked calmly across the home of the Toads, or in the Toads' case they jumped, Naruto asked, "Any idea what this new prophecy is?" "None. The old Toad is being extremely tight-lipped and is very serious," Shima replied. This response did not fill Naruto with much confidence. He had met the old Toad once or twice before, especially when he came here with Yugito when she was pregnant, and the old Toad prophesied that his daughter was destined for greatness, which did make him happy but sad at the same time. After all, greatness rarely came without sadness right behind it. He knew that better than most. They soon reached a rather large cave entrance in the side of the mountain, which is where the elder Toad lived and relaxed whilst fulfilling his duty to the Gama clan. "Toad Gigi, you called for me," he said, sounding confident on the outside, but on the inside he hated this, especially with every Toad that was capable of walking in Mount Myoboku looking at him. "Who are you again?" the elder Toad asked whilst looking at him after a minute. Naruto palmed his face hard. This happened every goddamn time and it annoyed him to no end. "Naruto, are the child of prophecy. So I've been told. You called me here for a new prophecy. There was such a prophecy recently. It does not end well. Would you like to hear it?" "Sure. Not like I have any choice since I'm here anyway." The elder's eyes glazed over like he was in a genjutsu, and he sat up straighter than he was before, speaking in a deadly serious voice. "The child of prophecy's time is almost at an end. His job done. He will have changed this world for the better by the time of his death, but he will die all the same. Armies are uniting, moving against that which he holds dear, and he will die protecting them, but as he dies the path of greatness that he lead will be open for another his blood to follow. She will rebuild the world after he has changed it." He finished. Naruto stood still from shock for over 5 minutes before he spoke anything. "Well fuck. Are you sure I'm going to die? It had been foretold. I really dislike your prophecies now. I have a daughter that will grow up without a father because of this. Who is moving against what I hold dear?" he said with anger finally showing in his voice. "I cannot foresee that, but I can see that it's a collaboration effort. Their forehead protectors simply say, alliance. Terrifies. How long do I have?" he asked in a dejected, defeated tone. 2 months from what I have seen." He sighed and looked to Fukasaku. "Send me home." It was a command, not a request. He was in no mood to stay here right now. The Toad nodded with sadness in his eyes. This was one of his students and he was going to die. He never liked this sort of prophecies. In a puff of smoke he was back where he left at the entrance to the training grounds. He walked over to his team. "Training is cancelled today. Some important news has come up and I will be busy for the rest of the day," he said, and left without giving him a chance to respond. He decided not to tell his family about this new prophecy and just enjoy his remaining time with them. His team were the same. He couldn't leave them without anything, so he sent 3 reinforced clones to write copies of his ninjutsu journals for each of them. He even made a shadow jutsu journal for his female student. His dreams and this prophecy were too close. They must have been connected some way and he wasn't looking forward to it. He was after all one man, one overly powerful man, but a man all the same. How on earth was he meant to stand up to an alliance of 20,000 strong on his own? He sure as hell wasn't going to involve his family, that was for sure. He was contemplating how his bijou could survive without him since they were linked in life and death. He had an idea about that. He hoped that he could modify the Shiki Fuane that his father used and keep the power so the seal would remain active but her soul could be placed into an enhanced blood clone. She would be human in every sense of the word, she could grow old albeit with Uzumaki vitality, have kids of her own with someone she loved if she ever found someone and die like a human, she would be reborn anew after 30 to 40 years but she would survive his death. And that brought some other troubling news back to his attention, this, Akatsuki, group, he had no idea how soon it got a hold of information on him since his spy network had nothing but he was grateful but he wasn't looking forward to fighting a bearer of the sage's eyes. He sent another clone off to work on this new Fuinjutsu whilst he had a nap, he was so tired and emotionally exhausted right now. He fell into what he hoped was a dreamless sleep so he could rest his mind and body but once again Kami just loved to fuck with him. A man stood in the center of the nine-tailed beasts, each looking younger and smaller than ever and each crying tears of fright. Apparently this man was important to them. Shukaku, Metettabi, Isabu, Son Goku, Kuko, Seiken, Chome, Gyuki, Kurama. You will never be alone. You will travel far and wide, do things humans can only dream of but you will never be alone. My descendant will dream of this, of you, he will face great hardships but he will persevere and throughout all of these hardships he will remain strong, he is my heir, he will change this world in ways that I never imagined and if the time comes when my ninshu is turned into tools of war then he will show the world that one man can make a difference if he fights for the right cause. You are family, he is family and the world will know that family stands above all. He said whilst coughing some blood, his time nearing. Go forth and remember that he will save you all. Kurama, watch him my daughter. He sat up suddenly sweating buckets and jumped out of bed. He had no idea of what the fuck that was but he was going to talk to his big sister about this. He found her watching Kushina from the porch and smiled, she is a wonderful child isn't she? Yes, she never seems to rest. So, Kurama. That got her interest right away, she had forsaken that name years ago because the sage's prophecy never came true. How do you know that name? I saw it in a dream. So it's time. Time for what? That dream was real. Your name is Kurama. In order, time for the prophecy the sage spoke of, yes it was real, a transcendent dream powered by the sage's eyes and yes my true name is Kamara however I forsook that name years ago when his prophecy never came. He checked to see if anyone was around and found it clear, he spoke in an even and clear tone. I want you to know the toads gave me a new prophecy. What of it? It spoke of my death in 2 months again a collaboration of ninja. An army, protecting those which I hold dear. What? She said in a slightly raised voice, she liked this man and didn't want him to die. Shit happens you know. But I have no expectation to die that day and in accordance to this prophecy I altered my seal recently just before I was called by the toads actually. I was having nightmares about me dying and if that happened then you would die as well and I needed someone I trust to protect my family should the worst happen so I changed the seal. You will live life as a human until your next death and it should take you twice as long to be reborn in demon form thus giving the world time to forget you and when you are reborn a chance at a new life. She said nothing, she was too surprised at what he had done for her. To her. He walked past her calmly, the calm of the man who knows what will happen in his life, the calm of a man who has accepted his death in the imminent future. Asterisk time skip 2 weeks asterisk asterisk. 2 weeks had passed since the day he spoken with, the now known, Kurama, he spoke with the Toad's blacksmith so that they can make him some armor reminiscent of a time long past, blood red metal plates like Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha's armor. The only difference was the fact that he had the kanji for oil printed onto its chest plate. He asked the Toads to hold onto it for him and decided that he would make the most of his time remaining with his family. Itachi still hadn't returned home from his mission and he was beginning to get anxious for his big brother but he believed that if he needed the help then he would call. The most important thing that happened in the last 2 weeks was simply he got married to his beautiful wife Yugito Uchiha Namikaze. It was a small ceremony, he had promised her that they could marry again in a big ceremony at a later date but he had insisted that they marry as soon as possible. She didn't understand why but she trusted him and they were married that evening at sunset atop the Hokage monument with the Sandaime Hokage providing over the ceremony. The paperwork was done and officially they were married. No one knew, not even his mother. His reason for this was simple: if he were to die, then the custody of his child would go to Yugito, which was fine, but if the elders suddenly grew a backbone and had her killed with some underhanded tactics, then the custody of his daughter would go to the state, and with the state it would go to the elders, who would use her as a weapon. Now that she was brought into his family, if she died it would go to either his mother or brother. Both he trusted with his life, and both were too powerful to be assassinated, unlike Yugito, whose chakra network was still recovering from him holding the Nibi's seal during the daughter's birth. Her chakra network should have been healed recently, but it was still too early to rely on for the daughter's protection. His thought process was disturbed by an Anbu appearing before him in the kneeling position like for all clan heads. Naruto-sama, your presence is required by the Hokage. He finished and bowed his head before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. And so it begins. He thought. He never talked to the Hokage much anymore because he was technically signed off on parental duties, and her calling him was far too close to the date of his death for his comfort. Something had to start the war, and he presumed it would be whatever she wanted him for. He sighed and flickered in a flash of red to the Hokage's tower. He walked past the secretary since he was requested by the Hokage and ignored her protests before walking into the Hokage's office and noticed her grim look. Naruto, follow me to the council chambers, please, she said without any of her usual defiance that sounded in her voice when she spoke. He nodded and simply followed. Arriving at the council chambers, he found the full council in session. Even the elders and civilians were here and seated. He walked over to his seat and sat beside Hiashi Hyuga, giving the man a brief nod. The Hokage soon spoke. Councillors, I have called you here today to say that we have received a letter from Kumogakur. She paused and noticed the discomfort on the faces of both Naruto and Hiashi. She understood about Hiashi but didn't understand Naruto. A 5-Kage summit had been called by Kumo in the Land of Iron. Naruto just sighed in resignation, going unnoticed by all but Shikaku. The civilians in the room burst out speaking, wondering what this was about and why now. The shinobi in the room just wondered why the civilians were even here to begin with, and Naruto had his eyes closed. Eventually they quietened down enough for Shikaku to ask, what reason have they called the summit for? The return of a missing nin, Yugito ni. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he flared his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan in anger. Before anyone could speak, Naruto raised his hand to silence all protests. I'm sorry, I don't know a Yugito ni. Last week I married a Yugito Uchiha Namikaze, if that helps, he said, providing the documentation for the rest of the council to read and therefore stopping any attempts by the civilians and elders to hand her over to stop war. War was going to happen one way or another. He looked directly at Tsunade this time. I will be accompanying you to the summit since it's my family they want. He spoke with finality, getting a nod from the woman. It made sense after all. A stupid civilian counselor spoke up. Please Naruto-sama, you have to understand this is war we are looking at if they don't get her back, and he stopped when he felt a massive ki coming from Naruto aimed directly at him. Know your place, civilian. He spat the last word venomously before tripling his ki levels to unregistered levels and making the civilian temporarily stop breathing before passing out. My wife and daughter will remain here, in Konoha by my side. If Kumo want a war, then they will find out just how dangerous I can be when pushed. I will search for them, I will hunt them, and I will destroy them. Last thing to say before I go, I formally hand in the paperwork to adopt Yugao Azuki and Heiat Geku into the Namikaze clan. Should I die, Yugao will take over as Namikaze clan head until my child is either of age or mentality to lead. He finished standing up. I will meet you at the gate in 2 hours, Lady Tsunade, he said before flashing home. His mother, daughter and wife were at the hot springs apparently, so he left a note and grabbed his gear before leaving to meet Tsunade at the gate. Naruto POV. 1 month since this war started, 1 month since I attended the 5-Kage summit, since my family was involved. We are alone in this. No one is going to save us, and most of us haven't the strength to save ourselves. I do, but I must wait whilst my comrades die. I wait for the time when I shall show the world true power. Iwa, Kumo, Oto and several minor villages stand against us, and we are losing ground fast. Suna can't involve itself in a war where they know they will lose and have abandoned us to our devices, our deaths. The enemy seem to be gearing up for something big, and I know it will be the end of me. Men that are being killed on the battlefield turn out to be clones, some new type of shadow clone that can take several hits and cost less chakra to make. It worries me who could make a technique such as this, but I know it was that snake. It is about time I go to my death. 2 months is almost up and I've trained the most possible. I've even started to reuse my old gravity and restriction seals, not to mention a new seal for chakra control that I made just before the summit that recycles wasted chakra into my coils, expanding them even further than they are already and messing with my chakra flow. I am now proud to say that I have as much chakra as the Nibi, who I am sure to face in the upcoming battle. After all, she was stolen by Kumo before me and Yugito got together. It was pure luck that I saved her. All my students have had this seal for half a month before they were sent to the front lines and are quickly becoming well known in the Leaf. Apparently my hellish training has prepared them enough to survive. Each are known as prodigies now and are being assigned tougher missions that Jonan tend to do alone. I am so proud. My beloved wife sends me worried glances every morning, like she somehow knows it will soon be my last, and I am so terribly sorry for the pain that I will cause her. The nightmares come more frequently now that I know I am going to die. It makes so little sense. This is my last entry to my diary. Only my blood can open it, so if you, my daughter, find this one day and read upon my many failures as a human and an adult, know one thing. I have only ever done one thing right in my life, and you are it. I love you and will be waiting for you. Love. Naruto Uchiha Namikaze. General POV. Naruto placed his diary on the bedside cabinet whilst locking it with the normal seals. He had finished cataloging every training regiment, jutsu and training equipment almost a month ago, and the only technique he had made since then was his last. A suicide technique in case he couldn't win against the odds he would face soon. He was about to go and eat with his family when an Anbu operative appeared before him. Naruto-sama, the council is being gathered. He simply nodded in understanding and sighed as the Anbu left. Today he was sure was going to be one of his last alive. He got dressed and flashed to the marker he placed on his seat in the council. They were all waiting for him. Thank you all for coming so quickly. Soon had started. The civilian council had been disbanded upon wartime protocols and was most likely never going to be remade, much to his amusement and enjoyment. All council members nodded when addressed. This was wartime, not the time to mince words. We have all been getting the reports of the Tri-Alliance forces turning into clones when killed on the fronts. Jiraiya's spy network has explained that mystery. The Alliance are mounting their forces for a campaign leading from Oto to Konoha for a final decisive strike to try and win this war before we get a chance to do some damage. She finished. All members except Naruto stood up in outrage. They were outnumbered and they knew it. If such a force attacked, then Konoha was seriously done for. He sighed and snapped his fingers twice to place a quick genjutsu on everyone. One put Tsunade to sleep whilst the other muted the room. He stood and walked to the center. I muted you. Why? Because I need to speak without you talking. I was contacted 2 months ago by the seer of the Gama clan. Jiraiya knows this, but he doesn't know why. They predicted my death against an army, but I'd done so much damage to said army that they lost. I will deal with this threat to my family and you need not worry. Tsunade will wake up in roughly 12 hours, which according to my spy network is when they will be just crossing into fire territory near the Valley of the End. Give this scroll to her. I've already sent a toad with a scroll such as this to each of the Great Five. It contains my greatest space-time fuinjutsu I've ever made. A real-time projection of the battle will be displayed for you to all watch. He finished as he snapped his fingers against dismissing the second genjutsu. They all blinked at him, but Shikaku was first to speak. Troublesome, what about your family? The world will know not to mess with them after this, not to mention severely weakened so they won't attack, and I've left training regiments for my daughter and wife once she recovers from birth, which should be within a month. No one had anything to say to that as he bit his thumb and summoned Fukasaku, the Toad Elder. It's time, he said before the Toad could say anything, which caused him to stiffen. Bring me my battle armor and scroll. He said with finality, allowing the Toad to pop away only to come back seconds later with a mannequin covered by red armor reminiscent of the Warring States era. It had the kanji for oil on its chest plate showing his allegiance to the Gama clan. The scroll was twice the size of the Gama clan's summoning scroll. Within it contained his weapons and seals he had already prepared in advance for his death. He knew he was going to die, but he was damned if he let them have it easily. He came to this meeting dressed for the occasion in a Warring States era Uchiha battle robe which was taped around his ankles and had the Uchiha fan on its back. He walked over to the armor and let a small smile run across his face as he placed it on before tying it tight so it wouldn't come loose in battle. He then proceeded to take the scroll and unseal his battle fan and placed it on his back. He crossed his arms and looked at the council, who were in shock. He looked like Madara down to his smirk in every history book. He turned and walked away with a clang in every step he took. As he walked towards the gates, people were giving him wide berth on the streets. The shinobi could sense the power of his aura as a warning, and he was intimidating all else. He was a man walking to his death high and proud. It took him a total of 6 hours to reach his destination. He didn't want to be tired, so he didn't rush and had a gentle run to his final resting place. He stood atop Hashirama's statue at the Valley of the End. A fitting place, he mused to himself. He had kept Fukasaku with him and had the elder summon toads for him since he didn't want to waste chakra at this point. Each toad knew its place and knew what to do. They went to work trapping the field with several seals he made for today. The list was huge: elemental seals, Horatian seals, gravity well seals, and many more. He had researched his enemies and found out what he needed to know. The Reikage was a nin taijutsu user and hardly ever used Reiten jutsu apart from his armor that was passed on to him by his father. Naruto considered his brother a bigger threat in the long run, a fully synced Jinchuriki host with stamina and reserves to match. Oto. Well, they were just a bunch of missing nin with Sasuke and Orochimaru, unless of course the snake took Sasuke's body in advance for this fight, which was highly probable. He snorted at the idea. It was too late to save his cousin now, and he didn't really care, to be honest. He had made his bed and had to lay in it. Iwa was next, an old man with years of experience. Not one to underestimate, but Genjutsu and Taijutsu should be more than adequate to take him since he is too old to move fast enough and his Genjutsu is top-notch. He sat down and waited for his toads to apply all the seals. He felt every single Horatian seal on the field behind Madara's statue. Each had a piece of his chakra in. The ground started shaking all too soon. He thought it was an earthquake for a minute, but then he realized that it was the army he was to stand against, the largest gathered in history. He nodded to Fukasaku, who proceeded to summon the big three, who were all clad in iron armor for war and Shima. Both elders sat atop his shoulders. Gamakichi was unfortunately not allowed to wage war with them since he was the Gama clan's heir. He waited and waited. 20 minutes later he stood in front of a much more deadly army than the prophecy suggested. He laughed inwardly. It was like Kami was trying to kill him for having ideas of ignoring this. Standing to the front were the Kage of their respective villages. What he noticed though was that the Mizukage and Kazekage were both in attendance. He snorted out loud. Those fools had just damned the villages. Something caught his eye though, his brother standing opposite him wearing a black cloak with red clouds. He felt slightly hurt at this. He locked eyes with him and placed him in a genjutsu he knew his brother couldn't break. So this is where you have been. Neither said a word for several minutes. Explain to me, brother, now, before I make Ka-san lose a son. He said with an edge to his tone. Tsunade sent me to infiltrate a criminal organization that were hunting the Bijou. Fool. When the fighting starts, leave this place at once. You are not needed on this battlefield, brother. This got a wide-eyed reaction from Itachi, which was saying a lot considering who he was. Eventually he nodded in return and smiled at his brother. The genjutsu faded and he stared out at the amassed army. What is this? Tsunade betrayed us again. I will have to make sure that the pit stain of a village is wiped off the map. I see 4 Kage 1, 2, 3, 10 S-ranked nuke nin in front of me. Oh, Sasuke is here too and Kabuto, but where is Orochimaru team? Why, standing right here, Naruto-kun Kakuku. He laughed evilly. So Sasuke finally sold his soul. Fool, he will never find out what happened that night now. So how are we going to do this? The Reikage stepped up. How about you stand there and die? Fool, you started this war in an attempt to take my family from me. I will take yours instead. He said with a dark edge to his voice as he held a ram sign with both his hands and said, Kai. Releasing toad oil all over the battlefield. Shima, light 'em up. He ordered. She nodded, although rather hesitantly, as she burnt 2,000 men alive, leaving the 50,000 strong army down to 48,000. He knew the only people he had to watch out for were the Kage and the S-rankers in the group. The others could be dealt with easily enough. He nodded to Itachi, which was the signal to flee, but before he did, his brother set 6 men afire with black flames. He had no idea who they were, but they all had a pair of eyes he recognized as the legendary dojutsu of the Sage of 6 Paths. He silently thanked his brother as he sensed him running away. Witness what you have brought upon yourselves. Witness what will happen to any that threaten my family and my line. Witness hell. He shouted, and he held the ram sign, and his eyes turned into the M's before Susanoo appeared, covering all 3 battle toads in armor as they attacked. All 3 toads jumped forwards as he leapt off their heads. The Kage stood still as they watched this onslaught. Their men were falling by the minute, but before they could do anything, Naruto roared in defiance as his M's shone bright red before a fourth Susanoo appeared around him, except this one was shaped as a fox. A fox with 9 tails swishing behind him. Naruto stood in its head on a gem whilst panting. He hardly ever got to practice this form anymore, and it took a lot of chakra to manifest, not to mention the mental strain of having 4 Susanoo active at once. The Kyuubi Susanoo roared forwards in an attempt to damage the enemies, but before he was caught in 8 tails of tentacles from an ox-like creature who was rhyming badly. Sorry yo, but bro says you gotta go. The ox yelled. Naruto recognized this immediately as Gyuki the Hachibi, partner to Killer Bee of the A and B combo. He said nothing as he stared into the beast's eyes and was dragged into the mindscape. The Hachibi was wandering around a turtle island which got a raised eyebrow. What are you doing here, fool? He looked to his right to see Killer Bee. Your brother wants to take my family away from me, so I shall take his for a little while and see how he likes it. Spikes of metal were immediately stabbed into Killer Bee. Genjutsu doesn't work on you because of the Hachibi, but inside the mindscape is another thing altogether, isn't it? His chakra can't reach you as long as I'm here, he said as he walked towards the Hachibi. What do you want, human? I'm borrowing you for a while, he said whilst he locked eyes with Gyuki and said, obey. A Sharingan pattern entered his white eyes and he bowed to Naruto, who turned back to Bee. Watch from there as you slaughter your friends and family because your foolish brother sought a war that he wished he could win, he said as he left the mindscape. Outside in the real world, the Hachibi let his tentacles loosen as he turned to face the army with a Sharingan in his eyes, showing them to their horror that he was under Sharingan control. He let his Susanoo drop due to the fact that his chakra was burning up at too high a rate. He had already used a quarter of his reserves and couldn't shield the toads anymore. Susanoo put a huge strain on his body and eyes even with his M's. He coughed a bit of blood into his hands. The army was in chaos trying to stop the battle toads. By the time they had managed to land a reasonable hit on the toads and dispel them, the army was down to just over 30,000. More than enough to kill him, he thought. The Kage were all staring at him still like they were trying to figure out a puzzle. He formed 3 slow hand signs so they could see. Inu, Tora, Haijutsu. He held the last sign for 3 seconds and they all sensed a medium-sized chakra output from him. What did you do? I had a clone infiltrate each and every one of your villages before this fight and placed a seal in the main square of each. This seal is a new space-time one that I made based on my father's Haration, and it transports live images in real time, so everyone in your village is going to watch this battle. Why? A message for all the years to come, for all your descendants and for anyone who thinks they can hurt those precious to me. My family is protected. Witness the rebirth of the Flash, he said whilst disappearing to one of the pre-made seals and beginning the onslaught of death. He stopped when he felt too dizzy to continue, but the army had been cut down to around 10,000. He had enough chakra to enter Sage mode, but anything more would be pushing it. He had to begin to pull on Kurama's leftover chakra in his seal soon or he would die. Kabuto. Do it, Orochimaru ordered quickly. He didn't want to die and it was clear that Naruto wasn't playing around anymore. Kabuto quickly nodded and went through some hand signs. Kuchiyos, Edo Tensei, he shouted, and a coffin rose above ground. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this and against his better judgment allowed it to rise and open. When the coffin opened, all around the field of battle you could literally hear Naruto slap his palm to his face. Out stepped the founder of his clan, Madara Uchiha. Oh, this should be good, he muttered to himself in sarcasm. Naruto sighed as he saw Madara look around. Where am I? You are at the Valley of the End and you are going to fight for us. Madara turned his head towards Orochimaru with a raised eyebrow. You want me to dance? That is fine, but I am no one's puppet, more like the puppet instructor, he said, grinning savagely. But before that I must check something, he said whilst going through hand seals. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. A large summoning circle appeared on the ground and Naruto held his stomach as he felt like a part of him was tearing away from himself. Kurama appeared in all her glory as a several-story tall fox with 9 tails. Immediately upon seeing this, she tried to swipe her tails towards Madara whilst using the others to help Naruto kill the army. She stopped once Madara looked her in the eye and cast his Genjutsu on her. The army was down to 5,000, but he still had to deal with the heavy hitters, not to mention a resurrected Madara and Kyuubi that seemed to be at full power, even though he was sure he took her power away when he released her from the Shinigami's contract. He could feel his battle lust growing at the sight in front of him. His lust for battle had been tamed and severely decreased upon becoming a father, which he was grateful for. He looked up towards Madara, who was staring back at him impassively like he was no threat. Want to dance? Madara perked up immediately upon hearing his catch line being used by another and grinned. He could tell this person was strong. He activated his M's and said, "Yes, why yes I do. What is your name?" Naruto activated his own M's while releasing the same grin as Madara. "Naruto Uchiha Namikaze," he said, grinning like a loon. Madara nodded and jumped upon Kurama's head whilst Naruto sped towards them with his gunbai in his right hand. He knew he stood no chance at beating the Kyuubi in her full form now that she had all her power back, and he wasn't too fond of the idea of sealing her in something again, or the fact that the only seal he knew capable of it without enough preparation was the same one his father used, and he wasn't wanting to meet the Shinigami anytime soon. He decided to use the enemy's power against them. With his speed he sped towards the S-rankers of the enemies and charged his feet with lightning chakra to bypass the Kazekage's sand before kicking him hard in the chest and sending him towards the Kyuubi's incoming paw. The paw did not stop and with great speed tried to slam into Naruto before he could jump out of the way. The paw also slammed the Kazekage into the ground. All other ninja around the area jumped out of the way before anything could happen. One down, Naruto said as he rushed towards the army. His speed was matched by the Raikage, who was contesting him in a fierce taijutsu battle. Naruto decided that the Raikage was worthy of a tiny amount of respect since he could keep up with him. He grinned as he immediately started to release his bloodlust in concentrated ki that would make younger ninja faint. The Raikage knocked him back towards the army, hitting several of the remaining men and sending them flying before using his center of gravity to flip his body over and begin to land. Before he could land, however, several small clay bats swarmed around him and began to explode. He did the only sensible thing he could do and used an E-rank jutsu to substitute with an enemy near him. And he said, "Praise the log and he shall provide." Naruto said before the Raikage was upon him again, cloaked in a vast lightning cloak that improved his stats all round. The Raikage was quicker than him, he would admit, but he didn't only have speed, so before the Raikage could do anything, Naruto locked eyes with him and placed him under the same genjutsu as Killer Bee. Metal spikes impaled his body for a split second before he cancelled the genjutsu, but it was too late. Naruto was already in front of him and kicked him at high speed towards the Mizukage, who was going through several hand signs. Before she was hit, she sprayed a wall of lava outwards towards where Naruto was going to be, but the Raikage had intercepted it before anything could happen, and a scream was heard throughout the battlefield as the Raikage stood to his feet, clutching what used to be his left hand but was now just a piece of cauterized flesh. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "That looked like it hurt?" he asked with a lopsided smirk. "Team!" roared before charging Naruto. His Sharingan detected a large amount of Sutan chakra built up behind him, and he looked then smirked, thinking that these fools couldn't do a better job of taking each other out. He baited the Raikage to chase him and at the last second moved to the right so the Raikage would go face first with a lightning cloak into a fully formed water dragon from the Mizukage. "That should keep him down for a while. Now to deal with you fools," he said as he looked to his right. Madara was still atop the Kyuubi's head whilst the Hachibi tried to contain her. The remaining Akatsuki were standing patiently for him to finish with the Kage. The fools should have attacked when they had the chance. Two things caught his eye suddenly. One of the Akatsuki people were gone, the lone female of the group, but he guessed she retreated for some reason, and there was another Uchiha amongst them with the Mangekyo awakened and turned on. "You Uchiha. What is your name?" "Toby." "Lies. There hasn't been a Toby Uchiha since the Warring States." "What is your name?" "How do you know I'm an Uchiha?" "Your eyes have fully developed chakra pathways behind them, indicating you've had them for a very long time. You seem to have a Mangekyo Sharingan active, and considering the drain of a regular Sharingan for a non-Uchiha, you would be dead if you weren't of Uchiha blood. Curious though as to how you aren't blind yet. It's not an eternal Mangekyo, so you should be blind from overuse, yet you look me in the eye when speaking to you." "I have an eternal," he roared in anger at having some of his secrets revealed to the world. No, you do not. The pattern isn't overlapping with another Sharingan, meaning it's not eternal. You have something to hold back the blindness though, don't you? It's on the tip of my senses, a powerful chakra not unlike mine from the Uzumaki side of my heritage, but it's barely contained inside you. Tell me, what is it? The rest of the Akatsuki were listening in as they were interested as well to know about their mysterious leader. It feels like Senju, but the only Senju to have such a strong life force that it could rival an Uzumaki is long since dead, meaning you defiled his grave, the grave of Hashirama. You will die for that. He was one of the only men I can respect even in death. Prepare yourself, for your death will not be quick and it will not be pleasant. He said before staring at Hidden, who suddenly combusted into black flames and was rolling on the floor trying to get rid of them. Deidara was an easy target as he was scared shitless of any Raiten user, which he took advantage of and used an advanced form of the Chidori he had seen his cousin use called Chidori Senbon. Hundreds of Senbon needles made out of Raiten chakra pierced the clay constructs, making them explode prematurely. The unlucky part was when several of the needles pierced his clay that had already been charged with his chakra ahead of battle to conserve his own, and exploded, ending the life of Deidara the Mad Bomber. Before he could congratulate himself mentally, he saw a white box surround himself and cursed. He vanished in a flash like his father before him and appeared beside a pre-made marker that was behind the Mizukage, who was currently going through several hand seals, and sliced her neck quickly, proving to all those watching just why he was a Kage-level shinobi to be feared. He was completely ignoring the 2,000 men left from the original army that were just staring at the fight in fascination. After all, it wasn't often that you could watch most of the S-ranked criminals and Kages of the world fighting one person who was S to SS ranked themselves. Naruto was starting to breath a bit heavier now. The use of hydration and his speed were taking a toll on his already drained stamina and body, but he wouldn't give up. Kisame and Sasori were next on his hit list. He was saving the Uchiha for last and he didn't want him dying too soon. He rushed towards Sasori, having read about him in the bingo books of old and new. Both said he used poison Senbon needles that were nigh impossible to cure unless you were Tsunade. He needed that poison for the next part of his plan. Unfortunately, it was impossible to find unless Sasori gave it willingly or he gave you one of his coated weapons. As expected, the human puppet fired a volley of Senbon needles towards him, hoping to either stop or redirect his advance and give him time to take out some puppets from scrolls. Naruto had no intention of giving him the time he wanted and ran at speeds that shinobi were envious of with a blue ball in his hand and smashed it into the puppet, aiming hopefully somewhere for the chest on the puppet that was inside, since he knew now thanks to Itachi what this abomination was. What no one saw was Naruto taking 10 of the Senbon needles from his weapons cache before storing them away in his own cache. He had used a lot of chakra already and he was down to about half, and that included the remaining chakra from his old tenant, which he was using to bolster and strengthen his muscles so his body didn't collapse from lack of stamina. He couldn't stop because he was afraid that once he did he would fall and lose. Naruto had watched Sasori use the chakra strings with his Sharingan, and as the puppet underneath flew away at breakneck speeds, he attached a thick but durable line of chakra to the chest piece in the puppet before pulling it towards him with a firm pull and threw a kunai towards the oncoming chest piece. Panting even harder now, he flipped over a slash at his legs from Kisame and threw all 10 Senbon needles at his back, hoping that Samehada wouldn't be able to flush the poison anytime soon. He was happy when all 10 hit, but disappointed when Kisame dropped Samehada and fell to the floor either dead or unconscious. He didn't check. These were the S-class criminals that all nations were so afraid of. What had happened to the world to become so weak? The Chushikage tried again to fire a dust-release jutsu at Naruto whilst he wasn't paying attention, but paid the price for it when his back cramped and he screamed in a startled surprise before Naruto ended his life with a wind-enhanced kunai. The Akatsuki were falling quickly and fast. Tobi was all that remained, and it seemed that this Setsu creature his brother spoke of disappeared like the wind, but before he could attack, the rogue Uchiha Orochimaru in Sasuke's body appeared. Orochimaru, he hissed, is my cousin still in there? Oh yes, he's watching right now and listening. Let him know I tried to reason with him before, but he was too stuck on revenge against a soon-to-be deadman. Danzo has left the battlefield once I started killing the Akatsuki and left his men to the slaughter, but if he wants revenge for what happened that night, then I will show him what happened since I was there. He locked eyes with Orochimaru and he found himself tied to a cross in a Genjutsu world. Watch what happened that night before I kill you. Orochimaru and Sasuke both watched Naruto and Itachi exterminate the clan and the events leading up to it and the aftermath for 72 hours. Both were drained mentally because of the time frame that the Genjutsu lasted for. In the real world they stopped moving except Naruto sliced Sasuke's throat and mumbled, "Apologies, mother." He turned his eyes towards the rogue Uchiha who stood smirking. "Little Uchiha, you don't seem to be S-ranked from what I have seen of you. From my brother's information on your little group, the only weapon you have is your little Kamui trick from your Mangekyo, and being a Mangekyo user myself, I know something that powerful has downsides such as the strain on the eyes and body. I bet you haven't even unlocked the third power yet, have you? Your taijutsu must be bad since you haven't fought in a long time, and your ninjutsu will be quite good considering you are an Uchiha by birth, same as the Genjutsu, but I wonder if we reach an impasse such as this, what will happen if I lock space-time ninjutsu from our fight? This got a bead of sweat rolling down the man's temple behind the mask. He was hoping he didn't know how to do that because it would be bad. Before he could think further, Naruto was flashing through several hand seals that were unidentifiable to him. Behold the limit of my inheritance from the Uzumaki clan. He shouted as large black kanji appeared in the air, making a dome around them. The real reason Uzumaki were feared was not their kenjutsu but their fuins. They had a style that the main house of Uzumaki could use and create seals in the air and manifest chakra-like constructs. I am the last Uzumaki, and I doubt my children will inherit my Uzumaki chakra or skills beyond any average shinobi. Prepare yourself, for I want to see how you dance without your little tricks, he said, and charged at the man. It soon became apparent that what Naruto said about the Uchiha was true. His taijutsu whilst mid-jonin level was nothing compared to his, and the few ninjutsu he used were fire-related because he never bothered to learn anything else. Arrogance. He did manage to capture Naruto in a genjutsu for about half a second, which saved his head but earned him a nasty cut to the mask, slicing the bottom half of it off. Naruto was surprised. This man didn't seem the genjutsu type like other Uchiha, but he grinned like a madman as he smashed through it and attacked. Eventually the rogue Uchiha was on the floor panting and about to get killed when Naruto turned to get a sucker punch to the face, sending him about 200 meters back and rolled several times. The unexpected attack made him lose concentration on the seal that was quickly draining his chakra, and the Uchiha disappeared in his little space-time ninjutsu to fight another day. Naruto grunted as he got up. The top half of his armor served him well, but it was torn off by the fighting, leaving him shirtless. He looked up to see the wreckage. You're up earlier than I thought. They heard a boom and looked over to see Killer Bee being transformed back into his human state with multiple cuts and bruises on his body, with his right arm hanging by a thread of bone and skin. You want your brother to survive? I nodded. Take him and leave. I have no time for you anymore, but next time listen to your brother when he warns you against something, you pig-headed fool, or I will wipe Kumo from the map. As it stands now, Kumo is now one of the weakest of the Great Five due to me slaughtering your armies all day. He finished with a wicked grin that sent a shiver down the Raikage's spine. The Raikage nodded and took his brother away quickly, leaving 2,000 men, Naruto, Madara and Kyuubi in her full form. It's almost time now, he muttered, hoping his family would forgive him. He was running on empty as it was, and now he wasn't sure if he had the strength to survive this battle. He had done much more damage than the prophecy originally stated and faced much worse odds, but knowing his family would be safe after this was a great load off his back. He looked over at Madara atop the Bijuu's head and growled. He didn't like that he considered Kurama family and let he be controlled. You dance well, Naruto, Madara said with a true smile and using his name to show his respect for the man before him. I dare say that had I been alive you would have killed me once we fought, but that's one of the perks of being dead, isn't it? I can't die again. I'll take that as a compliment, Naruto said before Madara charged him for the first time. They began a fierce battle of taijutsu that could be called Kage level, but as soon as it started it slowed, showing how tired Naruto was. It wasn't long before Madara had the lead. What he didn't know was that Naruto wasn't fighting for the win, but rather a change to land an open palm to the chest, which he got soon enough and said, "Contract seal." Several lines of fuin spread across Madara's chest and the Kyuubi's eyes went back to normal. He jumped away before shouting, "Leave Kurama. This is not your fight," he said before getting a kick to the face by an angry undead Uchiha. Kurama looked conflicted, but when she saw Madara start to look at her to control her again, she disappeared to give Naruto a fighting chance. Naruto stood up slowly as Madara approached him. You took my pet from me, you will have to be punished now. Naruto shakily got to his feet and spoke in a voice full of sadness as he ignored the fight with the Uchiha and continued blocking his fists and kicks automatically like a robot as he spoke. Kushina, remember these words, for they may be the last I will ever speak to you. I love you and your mother so much. I've always had a hole in my heart that your grandmother and uncle tried to fill the best they could, but it never worked. The social stigma I received when I was younger carried over to my adult years, and for what it's worth, Car-san, I apologize. I tried to be a good father to you, but I had no idea on how to do it with not having one myself when growing up. You and your mother fill me with a will to fight that I've never had before. I've fought countless enemies in my younger days as I courted war to test my strength, but I stopped caring when you came into my life. The toads will come for you like they did me, Kushina. Do not sign their contract. I will not have my daughter under the same pressure that I was under due to their prophecies. If you need to learn Sage Mode, just ask Kurama. She was with me when I learnt, and so was your mother, but only Kurama knows the ins and outs of Sage Mode. Practice well and become a force to be reckoned with. I'm sorry I will never get to beat the boys who you bring home down with my fatherly fist of love to show those scum that they aren't worth you, but I'm sure you will find someone in the end. Naruto said as he felt his arm leave his body. He looked down to his right and bit his lip to stop him screaming. He was losing big time and now he was bleeding just as bad. He continued to talk to his daughter although he was panting from the pain. You will never be alone, Kushina. You have 2 sisters on the way and I doubt your mother knows this, but take care of them. They will look to you since I am not around to guide them. One last thing to say, when you are in your darkest moment in life and you see no way to survive or help those you love and would do anything to save them, to protect them, hug the necklace I gave you close to your chest and pray for a miracle and I shall come. Death will not stop me, I will make it fear me in order to save you. Yugito, no words need spoke between us, my love. Naruto finished as he was getting beaten constantly and the crowd of just over 2,000 shinobi were cheering for Madara. Naruto fell over exhausted as he looked over Madara grinning at him. Fools, they don't realize that they are next. Madara just shrugged, not really caring. You were a good opponent and fought well considering your accomplishments today. I look forward to facing you in the afterlife. Naruto just chuckled, getting a raised eyebrow from Madara. I'm not done yet, he said as he was coughing some blood. He thought and concentrated hard on the flow of his chakra. He still had enough to enter Sage Mode from earlier and did so for the boost for his last jutsu. He released the first 2 Hachiman gates, giving himself a noticeable gain in strength, allowing him to stand tall and proud before he placed his closed fist over his heart and smirked. I think I will die on my feet rather than on my knees. Gaining a smirk from Madara, boosting his respect for the blonde shinobi more, but before he could do anything, Naruto continued. Simon, Shoman, Toman, Kaiman, Kyomenkai. 7 gates released one after another, blasting away several shinobi. Madara just stared unimpressed. He wasn't moving, so he doubted he could, and you didn't need to have a body in good condition to open the Hachiman gates as long as you didn't move. You know, earlier when I used the contract seal on you? He asked, getting an interesting nod from Madara. You are technically a summon yourself, so I cut the connection between Kabuto and you, which also cut the connection to the chakra that your body used to regenerate. You just haven't noticed yet. That was interesting to know, Madara thought. Still, it does nothing. You are barely standing and you don't look like you can fight anytime soon. Watch me, Shimon. Kaii. He screamed as his aura bled into a bright red mist, showing the 8th gate had been released. His muscles bulged under stress. I have minutes to live now, but I want you to know something. I want the world to know something. This war could have been easily avoided had man not wanted more. This world will burn because man wants more, and I won't be here to stop it a second time. The world and Madara watched on in interest as Naruto crouched down into the horse stance and screamed at the top of his lungs, I do this for you, my queen. He shouted, obviously referring to Yugito, A.N. 300 movies reference GG. A dome of energy spread out miles upon mile until it stopped 50 miles from Naruto's current position and faded, leaving nothing but a crater in the ground and countless bodies. Madara had been disintegrated and Naruto stood panting as he slowly closed his eyes. I'll be waiting, he said softly, falling to the ground. What he didn't know was that several Konoha ninja were closing on his position to help him if needed and recover his body if he had already been killed, and were just beyond the blast radius. They sped up and arrived just after Naruto fell forwards into an eternal sleep, waiting for the day when his family needed him again. He was buried in the Uchiha crypt and had preservation seals placed on him to stop his body decomposing, and the tomb was sealed only to be unlocked from the inside as per his request in his final will and testament. Years would pass as our hero slept away peacefully in the afterlife, waiting with his parents and friends he thought he would never see again, waiting and watching the world, watching his daughter's life and his wife, and she stayed a widow and hadn't moved on. Watched as his wife gave birth to a healthy set of twin sisters. He waited for the call that would come. He waited for when his daughter needed him the most. The day came and he had to say that he was proud of her. Whilst she wasn't at his skill level for her age, she was pretty damn close and was just a little worse off than him when it came to Genjutsu. His other daughters were both Tai and ninjutsu freaks, creating new ninjutsu and taijutsu just like him, leading their clans to new prestige. His brother had settled down with the ramen chef from his younger years Ayami and had a kid of his own, a son who was next in line after Naruto's children to heir of the Uchiha clan. Kurama watched his children and family from afar. Apparently she had her power back after being summoned and felt it was best to not get attached in case they died, and she lived on but continued to protect them as a last promise to him, her first true friend. Now he found his three daughters standing in triangle formation in front of a massive army of every ninja and samurai on the planet, facing off against a reincarnated Madara and the rogue Uchiha from his last battle. Things would be alright if it was just them. All three of his daughter could handle him together, but they had to split their attention between him, the rogue Uchiha, and the Jubi that somehow reformed, which confused him to no end. He watched his daughter reach for her necklace. "Tu-chan, I know you can hear me. You never go back on your word, and I need you right now. We need you right now. Help me and my sisters defend that which we hold dear." Naruto smiled. His little princess had matured greatly over the years and he couldn't be more proud of her. He stood from the log that he was sat on around the campfire in the pitch black with Tsukumo Hatake and smiled. "It's time," he said as he glowed brightly and disappeared. In the real world his body shimmered in and out of existence, showing his used a forbidden kinjutsu from his clan at the cost of an eye called Inzanagi. He reformed with his arm and one pure white eye showing it was dead. He was happy that he still felt some of Kurama's chakra within him, and the seals he had on at his time of death were still intact. He only had minutes before he would be needed on the battlefield, and he felt at 100%. He unsealed a Mangekyo Sharingan eye that he had stored on his body for years since the Uchiha massacre, the eye of Uchiha Shisui. He pulled out his eye and placed the other in his socket and used Sage Mode and what little of Kurama's chakra he had left to heal it. "Time to dance," he said before disappearing in a flash and landing on the battlefield, deflecting one of the hands of the Jubi from killing his children into the ground next to them, causing smoke to appear around him and them obscuring them from the armies and Madara's vision. As the smoke began to clear, he stood tall and proud, topless as the day he had died. His outline surprised a lot of them because they didn't see anyone stand in front of the kids to take the blow. "I told you I would be back, Madara." A voice ranged across the battlefield, stopping all fights. Several people recognized this voice from a live broadcast years ago when he fought an army. "No way," a mist shinobi said. "It can't be." A lightning shinobi screamed. "Get him away." Lastly, a Suna shinobi said, obviously seeing something others weren't. The smoke cleared completely and Naruto stood still with his arms across his chest, smirking at Madara atop the Jubi. He stopped smirking when he heard a voice from behind him. "Tu-chan," an uncertain Kushina voiced. He turned his head to face her and smiled, a truly genuine smile towards her and her sisters. "Stay here, girls. It's not your time to fight something so strong yet. Let your Tu-san show you how we do it old school, eh?" He smiled, ignoring the fact that they were only now a few years chronologically younger than him. They nodded and his face turned serious as he faced Madara. His eyes bled into the M's and a perfect Susanoo appeared around him with him standing in the gem on its head. His daughter all stared at it in awe. Yes, they each had the M's as they had swapped one eye with another of the siblings, and yes, they could each use Susanoo, but none of his children ever took it as far as he did. His Susanoo's face suddenly tripled and one turned to the left and one to the right as four new arms sprung from its body, each holding a weapon. "I told you I would be back, Madara, and now you seem to be alive. Let's see how well you dance when I am dancing fresh, shall we, Madara?" Madara smiled, a small genuine smile like he did all those years ago when he was revived with Edo Tensei. "Yes. Let's," he shouted. "Do you want to dance, Madara?" Silence reigned upon the battlefield. Nothing could be heard, yet everything seen. Naruto stood in front of his daughters and frowned slightly. "I cannot see nor can I sense her. Where is my wife?" he asked in a monotone voice, promising pain if not answered. He saw each of his daughters flinch, which already confirmed his suspicions. "You rogue Uchiha, I shall show you what it is like to have everything ripped from you. I will let you have your little moment in the sun, and then when you think you have won, I shall destroy you and anything that you love and or have loved. By the time I am done, you will but a speck in the sands of time, being covered by other insignificant specks. Tell me, Uchiha, what is your name so I can wipe it from the history books?" he said menacingly towards the unmasked Uchiha who he fought years ago. Unfazed by such a string of comments, even though he had lost to the man years ago after he defeated an army, he replied, "Obito Uchiha." Naruto perked up at the name. "Oh, the little runt of the Uchiha clan from my father's genin team. I can see your life forming before my very eyes, Uchiha runt. Kakashi always followed your little motto, meaning something happened to change his viewpoint, and I'm guessing it was something drastic such as your teammate's death. She was a kunoichi, wasn't she? Rin Nohara, if my mind isn't failing me. So let me take a stab in the dark here. You get crushed by rocks. Kakashi tries and failed to protect your female teammate whom you have a crush on like a little fanboy. You go nuts and my wife ends up dead because of it. Is that the gist of it?" he asked in a deathly calm voice as most of the ninja flinch at his voice. "Don't think I've forgotten about you, Madara-chan. You obviously had a hand in setting the stage for this dance competition, and because of it you will pay just as much as your comrade. Izuna Uchiha was your brother's name, wasn't it, Madara? How would you like to meet him again? I've always wondered who was the better Uchiha between the two of you, since we obviously decided I was the better between us two last time." He ran through several hand signs before clapping his hands together in a prayer stance. "Kuchio's no Jutsu, Edo Tensai." He proclaimed loudly, getting coughing sounds from most of the ninjas since they were fighting Edo Tensais all day and night. Two coffins rose from the ground and out came a woman and a man. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome back to the land of living Uchiha Izuna and Rin Nohara," he shouted loudly and full of menace. Kushina looked on in shock. She didn't know her father knew this jutsu, or the fact that he could be so angry at one point in time. The amount of ki he radiated was enough to put several of the lower class ninja into a coma just by being in his presence. "Izuna, why don't you reunite with your moronic brother, and Rin, you will come with me to see your old friend Obito," he said finally. Both nodded, not being in full control of their senses. Rin followed Naruto as he ran towards Obito, who just stood in shock at seeing Rin again. "I want you to know that this could have been avoided had you listened to my warning years ago. I died to stop man wanting more and to protect my family, and then you come along and revive this monster," he said as he placed his hand onto Rin's shoulder and smiled sadly. "You, my dear, are going to be a casualty of war once again, I'm afraid, except this time I will be sure you are sealed into the Reaper's stomach for all eternity, but don't worry, Obito will soon follow you. This seal is special, Uchiha runt. All damage you do to anyone in its range is transmitted via the seal, and the outcome is a double treatment of the pain that the person suffers, be it physical or emotional. She is at the moment suffering twice the pain I have since my wife is killed, not to mention the pain she is receiving from you. Oh look, she is crying," he said with a small smirk, as it was proven to be true. She was gushing tears and trying to fight back sobs that would escape. "Did you know that the Sixth Realm Sage was actually an Uzumaki? He had a third child that was a daughter to carry on his line whilst the sons formed their own. The Rinnegan eyes he held were said to be able to create anything from nothing, even breathing life into the bijou. The eyes were cheats to a very advanced technique that he passed down through the Uzumaki main branch house, i.e. his family. None since have been able to learn it, but I am Naruto fucking Uchiha bitch, and I break all the predictions, and this isn't going to stop my goal. No. By the day's end you and Madara are both going to die, and the bijou shall be back in their original bodies, but this time I shall make them disappear from the human world. They hold too much power, and yet it is wrong to seal them against their wills. Maybe a personal pocket dimension that will never collapse. Maybe another continent. Or even just a mountain range surrounded by space-time seals to not allow trespasses." He mused out loud as the entire ninja world just got mind-fucked. His daughter watched their father. One was feeling nostalgia form again at seeing her father for the first time in years, whilst the other two were feeling giddy to know their male parent. "Say bye-bye to Rin no Obito-chan," he asked politely as he pierced the girl through the heart with what appeared to be Kakashi's Chidori technique just to piss Obito off more. The body fell apart into ashes and a spectral image of Rin ascending somewhere was seen. Well, that was until a spectral image of the Shinigami came and ate her in front of Obito. Obito seemed to go into shock at seeing his one-time love interest devoured by the Shinigami and fell to his knees. "What to do with you now, Uchiha runt? You are hardly a match for me, and my daughters will kill you easily enough. Growl, I want more revenge against you, but I've already taken everything you held dear, so I'm just going to kill you," he said as Obito's neck was slashed open. Everyone cringed. They had been trying to kill that guy for ages, and Naruto comes in and does it in 10 minutes. Naruto jumped out of the way all of a sudden as a hand shot at him from the tail of the Juubi. He looked towards it and growled in annoyance. I left Kurama on her own and she was absorbed into you. Because of this I feel partially responsible for you being an issue, not to mention the fact that I left the world's armies in such a pitiful state that I'm surprised the Alliance has an army to fight you with. He spoke to the Juubi looking at it unafraid. He slammed his hands into the floor as hundreds upon hundreds of chains emerged for several Fuinjutsu kanji. They all wrapped around the Juubi as his movement came to a halt. A noticeable sweat was seen upon Naruto's brow after his current action and his was panting quite a bit. You are just a beast. He said looking it in the eye, you are nothing more than an unimportant pawn waiting to be moved onto the checkboard by these blessed eyes and yet you are so much more at the same time. Allow me to restore your humanity. He said as he held the Haijutsu hand sign. The chains seemed to suck Yuki and transform it into chakra and nature chakra using Naruto as a conduit. Uzumaki Haijutsu, Kuchio's no Jutsu, Bijou, he shouted at the top of his voice as the Juubi seemed to shrink in size and 9 new bodies came into view. Madara saw this and tried to intervene but his brother was his equal before death and thus put up a bloody good fight. Shukaku, Matatabi, Isabu, Son Goku, Kuko, Saiken, Chome, Gyuki, Kurama. I call you forth, come, show this fool the futility of his plans. He said as his daughters stood behind him in awe of his power. 9 figures came into existence and their fists met in a bump directly above Naruto as he placed his fist against theirs. Isn't this the one we've been waiting for? The one Father foresaw. I told you he would come. Father never lies. It's good to see you again Naruto-kun. Were just some of the opinions voiced. Matatabi, come forth. A giant flame cat with 2 tails walked forwards and bowed submissively. Who killed Yugito, your last host and my wife? He asked calmly. A pair of Akatsuki called Hiden and Kakazu. She was still weak from birthing your twin daughters and her chakra network wasn't fully recovered from her first birth either. It would have been when the girls were around 12 to 13 that her network recovered enough for ninja duties. She never stood a chance I'm afraid. She said sadly, she like Kurama had became good friends with her container but not to such as extent as Kurama. Are they still alive? He asked plainly. No, your daughters killed them rather violently I might add. They all have traces of Kurama and my chakra in their systems since they were birthed from 2 of our Jinuriki. She said sounding rather proud of that fact. He nodded in consent and faced his daughters and smiled at them. He couldn't deny that he was proud of them and the deeds and would be sure to shower them in all the love and praise he could for the rest of his life. Kurama came forth and bowed her head allowing her friend and family to climb on. She faced the Alliance and Madara who had been successfully restrained by his brother. These Biju have changed. No longer are they beings of Yuki but nature chakra meaning they draw their chakra from the nature in the environment and surroundings. Try to seal them at your own risk for they will just turn any container to stone and be reborn quicker than before. I am an Uzumaki and Uchiha, I never go back on my word and I am the strongest shinobi born in this era. This era is mine and I declare peace throughout. I dare you to try and stop me because I will annihilate you and your family's family. Be warned. He turned to face the husk that was once the Juubi and now the Gedo Mezu statue once more. He couldn't for all of his power seal it inside a new moon or the current moon like the 6 realm sage and there was a chance that one day it would be summoned once more which could be a real pain. He could lock it into a personal dimension and then have it collapse on itself causing it to disappear from existence never to be seen again but he rather liked the idea of having a memento of the moment he owned the Uchiha Runt and Madara-chan. If he wanted to stop the Gedo reforming into the Juubi sometime in the future he would need to stop any chakra usage around it. An idea hit him. He slammed his hands into the ground as the statue raised high above them on a stone pillar, black markings set around it, sensor seals, elemental seals, gravity well seals to stop fools using chakra to climb the peak and finally chakra absorption seals of both the nature and pure variety. Should some fool get to the impossible task of the Gedo Mezu statue now and attempt to seal the Biju the chakra would be redirected into nature chakra and sent out into the air where the Biju would eventually reform. The perfect punishment, give the enemies means, opportunity and motive but not give them chance to do any sort of evil plan. He grinned and had the Biju go their separate ways promising not to destroy villages. Kurama obviously stayed with him and his family and he would have to use the Kin Fuinjutsu again to turn her into a temporary human like before. Maybe she could help fill the hole for his children as a mother role. Since he couldn't revive Yugito, he was going to miss her, and he was sure as hell going to have some sort of mental breakdown later once he was alone with his daughters and Kurama. But for now he looked forward to seeing his children and spending all the time in the world with them and beating off boys with sticks for thinking that they could touch his pure daughters. He grinned. Life was bad at the moment, but it was getting better and would eventually be good. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.